Making a woman completely emotionally attached to you is easy, but you need to follow a few steps I'll teach you in this video. Let's get to the point. There's a kind of silent power that few men recognize until it's too late. It's not the power of force, it's not money, it's not even status. It's the power to become unforgettable. To enter a woman's mind and remain there, even after the last kiss, even after the silence. This power doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't impose itself, it infiltrates. And when it awakens, she can no longer escape. She's emotionally trapped. And the most curious thing? Almost always without knowing exactly why. This is the perfect trap. The woman you want, the one who seems free, unattainable, independent, is actually biologically programmed to become attached when she feels the right stimulus. And no, that stimulus isn't physical, it's emotional, almost always invisible, but absolutely real. And most men never learn to create this kind of addiction. Maybe because society has taught us that being nice, being present, showing interest is the way to go. But the reality? Emotional attachment is born from contrast, from the unexpected, from the inexplicable. The man she can't get out of her head is the man she's never been able to fully decipher. He's the one who created emotions she couldn't categorize. He's the one who planted doubts and sensations that her brain is still trying to resolve. And because the female brain hates loose ends, he returns. He returns to you. He returns even when she tries to move on. And he returns with greater intensity with each attempt to forget. The modern woman has been conditioned to seek stability, but what holds her emotionally is the right imbalance, the oscillation that confuses and attracts, the emotional experience she doesn't find in ordinary relationships. When a man masters this art, he becomes an architect of obsessions, someone capable of creating moments that repeat in her mind like an addictive loop. This is what makes a man unforgettable. The ability to make a woman feel that with him, nothing is obvious, and everything is intensely real. But there's a brutal contradiction here. Because we live in an age of emotional excess. Everyone exposes themselves, declares themselves, opens up. And this should generate more connection, right? Wrong. Excessive exposure has killed the mystery, and mystery is the womb of attachment. A woman who knows everything about you doesn't need to think about you. And if she doesn't think, she doesn't feel. And if she doesn't feel, she doesn't get attached. That's why the man who tries to show how good he is often ignored. But the one who makes her feel, without explaining, dominates. That's why this video isn't about how to be interesting. It's about how to be emotionally addictive. And that requires technique, vision, and courage. You'll learn to create sensations that defy logic, to activate instincts she doesn't even understand, and to lead the emotional game like a master, not a participant. A woman's mind doesn't fall in love with you. It falls in love with the story you make it tell about you. This story, when well planted, grows like emotional ivy, silent, persistent, and impossible to uproot without pain. Men's fatal mistake is trying to win over with presence when they should begin with absence. Not physical absence, explanatory absence, the absence of obvious answers. The absence of a clear definition. Fascination begins precisely there, when she looks at you and senses something that doesn't fit, something that seems contradictory, something she can't catalog within the archetypes she's learned to identify. And this seed, planted with precision, becomes an obsession. The human brain, especially the female brain, is programmed to solve patterns, to solve puzzles, to solve people. When you break this algorithm and present a presence that defies the pattern, you capture focus. And prolonged focus is the first symptom of emotional attachment, because no one becomes addicted to what they fully understand. The most potent drugs in the world are those that cause unexpected effects. It's the same with men. The guy who always responds the same way, who is always consistent, predictable, proper, is easily classified as safe and forgotten. But the man who combines sweet talk with a look that hides pain, the man who shows vulnerability but acts with dominance, the man who listens attentively but disappears without warning, this man enters her mind like a question that never has an answer. Want to understand why the Joker character in so many versions attracts the female mind? Because he carries an abyss that invites. He's not just crazy, he's indecipherable. And strange as it may seem, it's this indecipherability that activates the emotional impulse to try to save, understand, care for, or even resist. Every woman, on some level, has fallen in love with a chaos she doesn't understand. And that's why fascination is stronger than logic. He doesn't ask permission, he seduces. But be careful, there's a fine line between being mysterious and being incoherent, between generating fascination and seeming like an emotional idiot. The key is in the gradual surrender, in building an image that unfolds in layers, as if each encounter with you reveals a new level of what she thought she already understood. It's the Russian boxes effect. There's always something more inside. And if you think this is manipulation, stop. This is art. It's the design of a rich emotional experience. It's the same logic as cinema, literature, and theater. You only become captivated by a story when you sense there's something behind every gesture, every line, every silence. And what makes a character legendary is precisely what they never reveal, and what leaves others trying to understand. Robert Greene called this the seduction of incompleteness. The more complete you appear, the more expendable you become. That's why so many men, after finally winning a woman, lose their shine. They reveal everything, they open up too much, they give away the entire script in the first few scenes. And with that, they kill the suspense. They kill the fascination. They kill the attachment. What should be the emotional foundation of the relationship becomes the pit of interest. You need to understand, a woman doesn't cling to someone who reveals everything. She clings to someone who leaves traces, like a book with loose chapters, like a song that never ends, like a film that generates more questions than answers. That's what captures the mind, and what captures the mind captures the heart. And there's a precise technique for this, emotional contrast. A simple example, you tell a childhood story where you suffered profound pain, but at the end you smile and say, "But all this taught me to be grateful." Her mind freezes, because you just showed something fragile with strong behavior. This creates an emotional short circuit. And where there's a short circuit, there's tension. And where there's tension, there's memory. She'll remember this, she'll revisit this story, she'll replay that expression. She'll try to understand, how can he be so light after so much pain? And there you go. You've planted the seed. Her mind is now busy trying to solve you. And meanwhile, you're already 2 steps ahead, building the next contrast. Want another example? A man who has a calm, centered, silent presence, but who at some point utters a sentence charged with intensity. I hate it when people betray those who trust them. Short, direct, but said with his eyes, with his body, with the pause before and after. This sentence alone says everything and says nothing. And what does she do? She creates assumptions. Has he been betrayed? Who hurt him? Is it still hurting? And then the enigma is born. And where there's an enigma, there's fascination. Emotional attachment is constructed like an impossible equation to solve, but one that her mind tries repeatedly to solve. And the more she tries, the more you become part of her nervous system, part of her mental routine, part of her loop. But to do so, you need to leave gaps. You need to give her space to fill with imagination. And the female imagination is more powerful than any argument. That's why you should avoid obvious statements. Never say I'm sensitive. Tell a story where she sees it, but where you don't affirm it. Never say, I'm strong. Show it in your actions, in a heavy silence, in a difficult decision you made that she realized even without you explaining it. A woman clings to what she concludes for herself, not to what you say. Attachment isn't born from your statement, it's born from her interpretation of you. And there's a hidden power here. The scarcity of information breeds appreciation. It's like in the financial market. What's rare becomes expensive. When you reveal yourself completely at once, you become too abundant. When you control the revelation, you become rare. And the rare is irresistible. But there's something even more powerful, the ability to provoke reflection in her. When you say something that not only reveals you, but makes her think about herself, you break an invisible barrier. You become not just a man, you become a mirror. A provocateur of consciousness. And the woman who feels you make her think more deeply is the woman who will cling, because her brain will associate your presence with growth, and no one wants to walk away from what makes them grow. So forget about trying to impress with possessions, compliments, or promises. Start creating micro moments of emotional reflection. Phrases like, "Have you ever noticed how some people run away from the very things they want most?" Or, "Sometimes I think the traumas that shape us are exactly the ones we try hardest to hide." This is impactful language. It generates silence, and the silence after your speech is a sign of emotional penetration. It's when you're not just being heard, you're being felt. And to wrap up this foundation of fascination, one last key: avoid rushing to become understandable. Be too understandable, and you'll be too forgettable. Allow yourself to be a little enigmatic. Allow her to observe you. Let her guess. Let her interpret signals. The female mind is a sophisticated emotional reading machine, and when she encounters someone who resists immediate decoding, she doesn't give up, she persists. And that's precisely where most lose their way, when they believe that fascination is enough to keep a woman emotionally trapped. Fascinating is the first impact. Addiction is the true mastery, because fascination makes her remember you, but addiction makes her need you. And the line between a powerful memory and emotional addiction is thin, but profoundly strategic. The human mind isn't addicted to stability. It's addicted to anticipation. And this has been scientifically proven. Dopamine studies, conducted by neuroscientists like Wolfram Schultz, show that the peak of arousal in the brain doesn't occur when the reward arrives, but when it's expected. In other words, what's addictive isn't pleasure, but the uncertainty of pleasure. And when a man understands this, he stops trying to please and begins to oscillate. Because it's in this oscillation between presence and absence, between intensity and silence, between sweetness and firmness, that the kind of emotional tension that binds a woman is built in an almost biochemical way. This is the secret of toxic relationships that no one likes to admit. They work, not because they're good, but because they're unstable. And emotional instability activates the circuits of addiction. But unlike destructive scoundrels who use this instability to manipulate out of vanity, the conscious man, who masters the art of attachment, uses this oscillation to build continuous desire, without hurting, without promising, but always keeping the game alive. This is where the concept of intermittent reinforcement comes in. Taken directly from B.F. Skinner's experiments on behavioral conditioning, he proved that when rewards are given unpredictably, behavior intensifies. A rat pressing a lever that randomly releases food continues pressing it much more frequently than one who knows exactly when the food will come. Practical translation? The man who always praises is ignored. The one who praises occasionally, unexpectedly and intensely, becomes unforgettable. A woman doesn't want an emotional robot. She wants authentic, yet unpredictable, emotional intensity. A message in the middle of the night saying, "I just remembered your smile," out of nowhere, and it pissed me off, is worth more than 10 daily likes on your story. Because that phrase carries duality. It carries tension. It carries an emotional weight that defies interpretation. And everything that defies interpretation triggers attention. And constant attention is the fuel of attachment. But make no mistake, this doesn't mean being cold, distant, or manipulative. It means being deeply emotional, yet selective. It means creating an emotional pattern where every gesture has value, because it's unpredictable. The strategic absence of contact. The silence that creates anticipation. The lingering look she doesn't understand. The interrupted sentence she wants to finish. All of these become small doses of dopamine that keep the attachment growing without apparent effort. And there's an even more powerful weapon in this game: calculated vulnerability. Not the exaggerated vulnerability that reeks of neediness, but the kind that reveals scars with control. A man who says, "My mother taught me never to trust too quickly, and sometimes that gets in the way," is doing two things at once: opening a wound and showing strength. And this contrast is addictive, because it suggests depth, it suggests there's more. And more is the source of desire. Now, apply this to the behavioral realm. The woman who begins to feel that with you, nothing is repetitive, that each encounter is a new version of you, that each silence carries a different emotion, begins to associate your presence with an altered state of consciousness. This is stronger than passion. It's a form of hypnosis. And once she associates your company with emotional unpredictability, she becomes addicted not to you, but to what she feels when she's with you. And when you master this, She may even leave you, but she can't forget you. Emotional addiction is silent. It settles in the details. In the way you calmly touch her arm and then walk away as if it were nothing. In the moment you tell a story and stop midway, looking into her eyes and say, "But I'll tell you about that another day." And then it disappears. It disappears without warning, without explanation, without closure. Because the brain hates endless stories, and so it comes back. It remembers, it replays, and in replaying, it relives the emotion. And in reliving, it strengthens the bond. That's why you need to create symbols, emotional anchors, a necklace you compliment and then say, "When I see this, I remember the most dangerous version of you." A song you put on in the car and say, "This song has your soul." A place you visit with her and say, "This place will taste different when you're here alone." These are hooks, markers, symbols that remain even when you're not there. And the man who leaves symbols becomes immortal, because even when he's absent, he's present, and addiction feeds on this. Want more? Use the power of intermittent touch. Instead of hugging or kissing constantly, do it in moments of high emotional charge, and then withdraw. Create the feeling that each touch of yours is an event, not a habit. It's scarcity that creates value. Short, intense, unexpected touches, followed by a calm withdrawal, create a trail of desire. She begins to anticipate your touches, and when her body begins to anticipate your presence, the addiction is no longer mental, it's physical. And here's the final blow: disappear at the climax. At some point, when the connection is intense, when everything seems perfect, walk away first. End the night at its peak. Leave her alone with the impact. This creates positive emotional frustration, and frustration, when combined with desire, becomes obsession. It's not about being malicious, it's about being memorable. Because the man who stays until the end is forgotten with the end. But the one who disappears at the peak remains forever. This strategy is ancient. Romeo did it. Don Juan did it too. But what few realize is that these men weren't just conquerors, they were artists of timing. They knew when to appear, and they knew when to disappear. And disappearing at the right time is more powerful than 1,000 misplaced presences. And if you find all this complex, it's because you've learned to think of love as something fair, straightforward, predictable. But real love, the love that sticks, that burns, that endures, is profoundly unfair. It favors the unexpected, the rare, the ambiguous. It arises in the spaces between yes and no. And the man who understands this becomes not only desired, but necessary. When addiction sets in, a woman doesn't just want to be with you. She begins to feel that being without you is an incomplete experience. But there's an even deeper stage. A stage where you're not just a striking presence, you become context. You become a lens, a filter, an emotional anchor. She begins to interpret the world around her based on you. This is total immersion, the point at which your identity merges with her perception of herself. And at this level, you're no longer an option. You're part of her nervous system. This process isn't built on promises. It's architected with sensory experiences that challenge her emotional routine. The first step is to break free from the surface. Because as long as you're just another interesting guy, you'll be competing for space with other stimuli. But when you become the man who provokes questions about her own life, you become the center of the emotional narrative she lives. And whoever controls the narrative, controls the bond. How? Through strategic listening. Not the passive kind of listening that only responds. But active listening is what provokes revelations. When a woman speaks and you, instead of judging or advising, ask a question like, "What do you think this reveals about you?" You break the script. She stops. She thinks. And in that micro instant, you're no longer an ordinary man. You're a mirror. And every human being is attracted to someone who helps them understand themselves. The female mind, contrary to what many think, doesn't seek ready-made answers. It seeks validation of its own complexity. And when you demonstrate the ability to navigate these layers, she begins to trust. But it's a dangerous trust, because it's not logical, it's sensory. She trusts how she feels around you. And this creates the illusion of destiny. The thought that no one has ever understood me like this is the beginning of the collapse of resistance. Have you ever heard someone say, "It feels like we've known each other for years"? That's no coincidence. It's the activation of emotional memories she can't yet name. You become familiar by accessing emotions that were stored away. And when you activate unconscious memories, she doesn't associate you with the present. She associates you with who she once was, with parts of herself she may have forgotten. This creates a sense of reunion, and reunions are always stronger than encounters. But there's an even more powerful technique: partial surrender with reversed return. You reveal something of your own, emotionally weighty but not fully explained, and then you make her reflect on something about herself. Example: you tell a story that reveals your relationship with fatherlessness. And at the end you ask, do you feel like someone broke your trust before you knew what trust was? This question doesn't seek an answer, it seeks access. It's an invitation for her to descend with you. And the deeper she goes, the harder it will be to resurface without you. True emotional immersion happens when you become a facilitator of her inner expansion. And when she begins to associate her own evolution with your presence, attachment transforms into subtle emotional dependence. Because now it's no longer about you, it's about her with you. Her perception of herself has changed. And you were the catalyst. And herein lies the paradox. The more important you become, the more you must disappear at key moments. Disappearing after a deep connection creates a void that she tries to fill with repetition. And repetition creates fixation. And fixation disguises itself as longing. But in truth, it's emotional withdrawal. Jose Ortega y Gasset said that love is the surrender caused by fascination. But in the immersion stage, this surrender is no longer a choice. It's inevitable, because you become the symbol of an internal transformation. She looks at you and doesn't just see a man, she sees the portal you've crossed to know yourself better. And no one leaves what awakens the most vivid version of you. But be careful. This isn't built through manipulation. It's built through polished truth. You truly need to have depth. Have something to say. Have pain and light within you. Because emotional emptiness is noticeable. And the man who pretends to have a soul is more repulsive than the man who admits he doesn't know who he is. Therefore, dive deep within yourself. Explore your contrasts. Master your shadows. Only then will you be able to lead someone safely into the emotional labyrinth. And what's more, with magnetism. And now you understand why so many good men are forgotten, and so many unlikely men are idolized. It's not about resume, it's about symbolic presence. It's not about stability, it's about transformation. The man who transforms becomes a myth, and the myth remains. You get the idea. Attachment isn't born from affection, it's born from well-orchestrated emotional confusion, from the silence between two sentences, from the pause she can't decipher, from the touch that comes and goes like an intense memory. A woman doesn't fall in love with a predictable man. She becomes emotionally attached to the one who becomes a mirror, and then an absence, a portal, an impact. But none of this is random. There's structure behind the chaos, formulas hidden behind intuition. And if you've gotten this far, it's because you feel it. You no longer want to be the guy she occasionally remembers. You want to be the one she tries to forget, but can't. The good news? It can start in less than 60 seconds. What I've revealed here is just the surface. Deep within attraction, there are codes, phrases, micro-behaviors, bodily dynamics that activate her emotional brain before she even knows what she's feeling. And when these codes are triggered in the right way, desire is born. Raw, visceral, almost uncontrollable. That's the power of the Forbidden Manual, how to trigger desire in 60 seconds. Now, in a complete audiobook version, with everything gleaned from behind the scenes of human behavior, and that most men will never discover. Click the link in the description and unlock the real game.